The board voted, "You're out." My wife laughed. "My new partner is your boss now." I winked. Look under Section 7B. Hours later, they regretted everything. I'm 52. For the last 5 years, I was one of the founding partners of a tech consultancy firm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, Redline Systems. We started small, just 3 guys and an idea. Brendan, Malik, and myself. Brendan and I met at a tech expo years ago in Austin. Malik was an old college friend who brought us our first few big clients. The company was my brainchild, but we built it together. My wife, Celeste 48F, and I had been married for 20 years. She worked in HR for a Fortune 500 company, smart, career-driven, and very private about her work. Our kids are grown. Our daughter Nora is in med school in Winston-Salem, and our son Lucas just started a finance job in Raleigh. We had what looked like a solid marriage. At least, that's what I believed. Looking back, I realized there were red flags. Only they didn't look like red flags at the time. Just subtle shifts. Quiet absences. New friends I never met. Girl trips that always came with vague details. New clothes, new perfume, more time at the gym. The trouble started to get real around the time Redline began scaling up. We signed a major logistics contract with a big box chain, and money started pouring in. We expanded quickly, and suddenly, we were playing in a different league. With success came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came cracks in the foundation. Brendan began holding meetings without me. "Just minor catch-ups," he said. Malik started disagreeing with me more frequently in public forums, something he'd never done before. I was being gradually edged out. I knew it, but I didn't know why. Until one day, I stumbled on something I shouldn't have. Celeste left her work laptop open while she was getting ready upstairs. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. The screen just caught my eye. There was a contract open, a partnership agreement between Redline Systems and a company I'd never heard of before, Ardent Innovations. Celeste's name was in it. That's when I knew I wasn't being paranoid. I took a screenshot and sent it to myself. My hands were shaking. The next few weeks were a blur of me playing dumb, pretending I hadn't seen anything, while quietly putting the pieces together. Turns out Brendan and Malik had formed a backdoor partnership with Ardent. They had been funneling company funds to build this other firm behind my back. And they brought in Celeste, my wife, as a strategic partner. Her HR background made her the face for compliance, which probably helped them bypass internal checks. They were planning a hostile takeover, and I was the target. I wanted to throw things, confront everyone, blow the whole thing up, but I didn't. I needed time, and I needed proof. So I hired a forensic accountant. Told no one. I don't think I slept more than 3 hours a night during that period. I'd sit at the dining table after Celeste went to bed, sipping coffee, going through ledgers, emails, messages I'd backed up from Brendan's account when we were still on friendly terms. The accountant found everything. Fake invoices. Duplicate transactions routed through shell companies. One of the shell companies had been registered under Celeste's maiden name. That's when the betrayal really sank in. She wasn't just complicit. She was an architect. Still, I didn't confront her. I needed the right moment. In our original partnership charter, which I wrote with our attorney years ago, there was a clause that most people forgot about. Section 7B. It allowed for immediate board action in the event of financial misconduct or evidence of a breach of fiduciary duty. No vote required. Just evidence. It had been buried in the legalese. Now I had it. I made copies. I met with the board chair and presented everything. He was stunned. Fast forward to last Friday. I walked into the boardroom to find Celeste seated at the end of the table next to Brendan. Malik was pacing by the window. Everyone looked too confident. Brendan opened with the announcement. "We've received a majority vote to transition executive leadership. Colin, effective today, you'll be stepping down as CEO. Ardent Innovations will be stepping in as a partner, and Celeste will oversee the merger transition." She actually laughed. That cold, dismissive laugh people only give when they think they've beaten you. "My new partner," she said, gesturing at Brendan, "is your boss now." I took a deep breath. "I'd like the board to refer to the packet labeled Section 7B in front of them," I said calmly. Celeste's smile faltered. They opened the folder. 30 minutes later, the room was dead silent. The chair looked over his glasses at Brendan, Malik, and Celeste. "Effective immediately, you're all terminated from any involvement in Redline Systems. We'll be pursuing legal action as outlined in Section 7B. Brendan looked like he'd been hit with a truck. Malik didn't say a word. Celeste stood up, red-faced, and stared at me. "You planned this." I didn't answer. They were escorted out by building security. I've had a lot of time to think since that day. The fallout's been messy, especially with the kids. Lucas was furious, not at me, but at his mom. Nora was quieter, but supportive. They didn't see it coming either. Celeste moved in with her sister. She tried calling me once. I didn't answer. The divorce papers are sitting on my lawyer's desk. I haven't signed yet. I know I should. I keep going back to that moment in the boardroom. The smug look on her face, like she'd already rewritten the story of our lives and erased me from it. And then how fast that confidence crumbled. The aftermath of that day at the boardroom didn't hit immediately. That kind of betrayal, both business and personal, doesn't feel like an explosion. It feels like a long, slow collapse. Like the air slowly leaking out of everything you thought was solid. The first few days, I stayed numb. I didn't talk to anyone unless absolutely necessary. I went to the office, signed papers, talked with the legal team, avoided eye contact with people who clearly knew what had gone down. Word had gotten out fast. People talk, but no one said anything directly to me. I went home each night to a house that suddenly felt like a crime scene. Every picture on the wall, every mug in the cabinet, every folded blanket on the back of the couch reminded me of Celeste. Her perfume still lingered in the bathroom. Her robe still hung on the door. I couldn't bring myself to throw anything away. Lucas called first. He'd heard from his mother. He wanted to know what was going on. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell your son that his mother helped steal your life's work and tried to put you out on the street? He pressed me until I told him the truth. I kept it clinical, factual, no emotion. There was silence on the other end of the line for a while. Then he asked, "Did you see it coming?" I didn't answer. Nora texted the next day. Just a simple, "Dad, I love you. Don't let her break you." That one hit me harder than anything else. The divorce process kicked off quickly. Celeste didn't fight it. I think she was advised to keep her head down. Her name was all over those documents, those fake companies. Even if criminal charges weren't filed, her reputation in the corporate world was in shambles. Her new partners, or should I say former partners, Brendan and Malik, tried to pivot. But Redline had initiated a full-scale audit, and the findings weren't going to let them walk away clean. Investors were furious. The board had no choice but to publicly distance the company from the whole mess. I'd made sure to quietly document everything over the past few months. They couldn't spin it. Malik tried reaching out. He sent me a message asking for a chance to explain. I didn't respond. Brendan didn't even try. What stunned me more than anything was how deeply Celeste had been involved. She didn't just stand by. She had helped build the infrastructure, shell accounts, hiring contractors to create paper trails, falsifying HR reports. She used her position to make everything look legitimate. It was methodical, planned. I couldn't help but go back through our last year together in my mind. I played every conversation like a reel on a projector. Little things that didn't feel important at the time. Her casual disinterest in my late-night business ideas, the way she started locking her phone, the sudden interest in financial podcasts, just to help Lucas with his career. It wasn't one moment. It was a long, slow betrayal spread over months. And I didn't see it coming. The lawyers advised me not to go after her criminally, not yet. Focus on the divorce. Get your assets locked down. They were worried she'd try to claim marital property from Redline if things got messy. I'd made sure, years ago, to keep company ownership protected in our prenup. She had signed without a second thought back then. We were both young, in love, building our future. Now that piece of paper was the only thing keeping her from bleeding me dry. People say revenge is best served cold, but I wasn't after revenge. I wanted my life back. I wanted peace. I started walking every morning. I'd wake up before sunrise, lace up my shoes, and walk the neighborhoods around Lake Norman. Sometimes I'd go for hours, not even realizing how far I'd gotten. It was the only time I felt like myself again. I bumped into an old friend on one of those walks, Dell, a guy I'd met through a leadership workshop years ago. He'd gone through a messy divorce too. We ended up grabbing coffee, and I unloaded more than I meant to. He listened without interrupting. When I finally ran out of steam, he just nodded and said, "You're not the first man to get blindsided by the person sleeping next to him, but you're one of the few who had a parachute." That stuck with me. There was still fallout to deal with. Redline had to reassure clients. Some accounts pulled out. Others doubled down when they realized we were cleaning house. I stepped back in as interim CEO, but I knew I didn't have the energy to lead the way I used to. I was too raw, too tired. We brought in a new executive team. People with fresh ideas, clean slates, no connection to Brendan or Malik. I stayed on as a board advisor. That was enough. I sold the house a few months later. I couldn't live there anymore, not in that space filled with ghosts. I moved into a smaller place not far from the water. Nothing fancy, just quiet, peaceful. The kids visited on weekends. Nora would bring her textbooks and sit on the porch with me while Lucas grilled on the back patio. We didn't talk about their mother much. When we did, it was in short sentences. Nothing bitter, just facts. I found myself thinking about the nature of betrayal, how it creeps in, how it often wears the face you trust most. Celeste wasn't always like that. She used to be my best friend. She used to fall asleep on my chest while we watched documentaries on a Friday night. She used to leave me little notes on the fridge. It didn't feel like she was pretending back then. So what changed? Was it greed? Boredom? Resentment? I may never know. What I do know is this. Losing everything you thought defined you doesn't mean you've lost yourself. You just have to find out who you are without it. And maybe, just maybe, that version of you is stronger. The divorce dragged longer than I expected. Celeste's lawyer tried to push for mediation first, which I was open to. There was a quiet part of me, and I hate admitting this, that still wanted to sit across from her and ask why. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. I just wanted to hear it. From her. In her voice. We scheduled a private session with just the lawyers and a mediator. It was awkward from the moment she walked into the room. She looked thinner, tired, but not ashamed. She didn't look at me. Not once. The mediator laid out the rules. The lawyers exchanged formalities. And then Celeste finally spoke. Her voice was flat. I think this marriage died a long time ago, Colin. We just didn't say it out loud. I kept my hands folded on the table. Did it die before or after you decided to help my business partners steal my company? She flinched, but only for a second. That wasn't about you. It was about opportunity. That line. It wasn't about you. As if 20 years of marriage was just a footnote in her little personal side hustle. The lawyers interrupted before I could respond. We didn't speak again after that day, except through legal documents. It became a matter of logistics. Assets. Property. Pensions. My lawyer did most of the heavy lifting. Thank God for that prenup. She got what she was entitled to. No more. No less. One night, a few weeks after that mediation session, I found myself staring at an old photo tucked into one of the drawers I hadn't fully unpacked from the move. It was from our honeymoon. Asheville, 2002. We were standing in front of the Biltmore estate, holding plastic wine cups, laughing at something neither of us remembered. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. I put it in a shoebox with a few other pieces of that old life. Not out of sentimentality, but out of, I don't know, respect for the man I was. For the version of her that loved me once, before the ambition took over. In some ways, letting go of the company was easier than letting go of the marriage. Redline had always been business. It had structure, boundaries, numbers. A business betrayal could be countered, documented, litigated. But with Celeste, I had to mourn something I couldn't measure. Trust. Shared memories. The quiet routines. After the divorce was finalized, I started getting strange messages. Old colleagues. Clients. Even Brendan's former assistant. Everyone wanted to talk, now that the dust had settled. Apparently, Brendan had tried spinning the story, said I was burned out, that I handed the reins over voluntarily, that he and Celeste had stepped in to save the company. But the truth had leaked. One by one, people saw through it. His reputation? Torched. He was quietly dropped from 3 boards. Malik managed to land a small consulting gig overseas. Someone told me he moved to Berlin to get away from the noise. I didn't follow up. I didn't care. Celeste? She was a ghost. I heard through mutuals that she tried applying to several firms, but word spread. HR is a small world, especially in Charlotte. You don't bounce back from that kind of exposure easily. Part of me wondered if she'd reach out again. Apologize. Or at least explain. But she never did. The kids kept me grounded. Lucas came by every few weekends, always bringing something. Lawn chairs, a new coffee maker, a box of grilling tools. I think he was trying to rebuild something between us, brick by brick. He never spoke badly about his mom, but he didn't defend her either. I respected that. Nora was more direct. You deserve better, she told me over dinner one night. I wish I'd known. I could have said something. I always thought she was distant, I guess. I just figured that was how she showed love. I didn't say much in response. Just nodded. Truthfully, I didn't know what love was supposed to look like anymore. I tried dating again. Once. Someone a friend set me up with. A therapist, divorced, 2 grown kids. We met for coffee. She was kind, insightful, and we had a decent chat. But when she asked about my last relationship, I froze. Not because I didn't want to talk about it, but because I didn't know where to begin. It felt like too much baggage for a first date. I smiled, paid for her latte, and told her I wasn't ready. She understood. She thanked me for being honest. That night, I sat outside on the patio, listening to the sounds of spring coming in. Crickets, distant laughter, a neighbor's dog barking in bursts. It wasn't silence, but it was still peace. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was chasing me. There's something quiet and hard about rebuilding at this stage of life. You don't bounce the way you do in your 20s. You don't have the same endless optimism. But you do have clarity. And you have choice. Real choice. You get to decide what pieces are worth picking up and which ones you leave on the floor. Redline was thriving again, by the way. The new CEO, Maggie Tran, was a firecracker. Smart, no nonsense, and driven by purpose rather than ego. I mentored her for a few months before stepping back fully. Watching her work reminded me why I started the company in the first place. Not for power, not for prestige, but for solving problems that mattered. Sometimes people at the office would ask if I ever missed being in charge. I'd smile and say, no, I'm exactly where I need to be. But I still had one more piece of unfinished business. I hadn't seen Celeste since the mediation session, but our lawyers had scheduled a final meeting to sign the last property document. Just a formality, they said. 5 minutes, in and out. I arrived early. She walked in 5 minutes late. She looked older, not in the physical sense, just heavier, like someone who had been dragging something behind her for too long. We sat down. Our lawyers exchanged paperwork. Neither of us said a word. Then, as I stood to leave, she spoke. You really hated me that much? She asked, voice low. I turned slowly. I didn't hate you, I said. I trusted you. She didn't look up, just nodded. That was it. We didn't hug. We didn't make peace. We just walked away from a 20-year life like strangers in a courthouse. I didn't go straight home after that last meeting. I drove for hours instead. No destination. Just turned off my phone, rolled the windows down, and let the highway guide me. I ended up somewhere just outside of Boone, near the Blue Ridge Parkway. There was a tiny roadside diner. One of those places with faded Coca-Cola signs and pie that comes pre-wrapped in cellophane. The waitress didn't ask questions. She poured my coffee, gave me space. I sat there until dusk. I thought maybe after that meeting, after those words between Celeste and me, something inside me would shift. Like a dam breaking. Closure. But instead, I felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Just too many things tangled together to pull apart. What she said stayed with me, though. You really hated me that much? It was a strange thing to ask. A strange time to ask it. Maybe she needed me to say I still cared. Maybe she wanted to believe that my silence all these months was proof of pain, not indifference. But it wasn't hate that made me walk away. It was disappointment. There's something about betrayal that makes you question everything, not just the person who betrayed you. I spent months wondering if I was stupid, naive, arrogant, inattentive, all the things that might have made it easier for her to justify what she did. And the worst part? I'll never get the real story. I'll never know the version of the truth that lived in her mind. Eventually, you have to stop chasing answers and live with the ambiguity. Back in Charlotte, things were stabilizing. Redline's legal team had managed to finalize the financial recovery plan. Some of the funds stolen through the shell accounts had been frozen and partially reclaimed. Brendan, despite his posturing, had been hit with a personal lawsuit. Malik, from what I heard, quietly settled his portion and washed his hands of the whole thing. I didn't follow the legal proceedings closely. I let the lawyers handle it. I was tired of courtrooms and documentation. All I wanted was forward motion. In late spring, I was invited to speak at a small business conference in Raleigh. They wanted someone to talk about leadership under adversity. I almost said no. But then I thought, maybe this is the way back. Not to what I had, but to something better. When I got up on that stage, the lights in my face, crowd hushed. I didn't talk about numbers or organizational structures. I told them a story. My story. Not about the betrayal, not in detail, but about rebuilding. About trusting your gut when the people closest to you are whispering otherwise. About learning to sit with failure and then use it as scaffolding for something new. Afterward, people lined up to thank me. Some shook my hand like I'd just handed them a blueprint to survive something they were too ashamed to talk about out loud. That night, I sat alone in the hotel lounge, nursing a small bourbon, when a woman in her early 60s sat at the table next to me. She hadn't been at the conference, I could tell. She was in town for something else. But she smiled in that kind way people do when they see you deep in thought and don't want to interrupt. Eventually, she spoke. You look like someone who just walked out of a fire. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. That obvious? She nodded. It's not the burn marks. It's the silence. People don't get quiet like that unless they've been through something big. We didn't exchange names. Didn't need to. Just two strangers sharing a table, a drink, and a mutual understanding that life sometimes knocks you flat on your back. After she left, I wrote something in the notes app on my phone. Maybe the fire isn't the end. Maybe it's the clearing. I returned to Charlotte with a lighter heart. Still bruised, still healing, but lighter. Lucas came by again that weekend. He brought his girlfriend this time, a smart, steady woman named Alina. She asked thoughtful questions, made great coffee, and talked to me like I was a person, not a story. I liked her instantly. Lucas pulled me aside before they left and said, I know it's been a hell of a year, but I just want you to know I've never respected you more than I do now. I didn't cry, but I came close. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about being the bigger man. It was about being seen, not just as a father, or a CEO, or an ex-husband, but as a man who walked through something most people don't come back from, and stayed kind. The letter came 2 months later. It arrived on a Thursday. No return address, handwritten, postmarked in Asheville. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Inside was a single page, folded twice. The handwriting was familiar. The kind you remember even if you haven't seen it in years. Loopy L's, tight E's, the way she used to write grocery lists on the fridge. It started simply. Colin, I know you don't owe me anything. And I know I lost the right to speak into your life the way I used to. But there are things I need to say before the silence swallows them completely. I didn't finish reading it right away. I folded it up, placed it on the table, and went for a walk. Something about her words, the vulnerability, the guilt bleeding through the lines, made me feel everything at once. Not forgiveness, not fury, just a deep, almost exhausting ache for the life we almost had, the one she shattered by choosing something else. When I got back, I poured a glass of water, sat down, and opened the letter again. She went on to explain how it started, the resentment, the need to feel powerful in a life that had started to feel like a supporting role. She never said it was my fault, but she acknowledged how easy it was to blame me when her own reflection started to scare her. She admitted she had fallen for Brendan, or thought she had, mistaking adrenaline for intimacy. By the time she realized what she'd helped destroy, it was too late. She ended with a line I'll never forget. I know you don't believe in closure. Neither do I. But I believe in truth. And this is mine. Do with it what you want. See, I didn't write back. Not because I didn't care, but because some truths don't need a response. They just need to be heard. After the letter from Celeste, things quieted down. I didn't feel the urge to respond. She said what she needed to say, and I heard it. Maybe that was all either of us was ever going to get. Closure, in the adult sense. Not some cinematic reckoning, but a calm agreement to move on with separate truths. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. That fall, I was invited to give a talk at UNC Charlotte, a guest panel on ethics and entrepreneurship. I almost declined, but the professor was a former client, and she was persistent. So I agreed. The day of the panel, I arrived early, sat through some student presentations, and then walked up to the front of the lecture hall for the Q&A portion. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the last student stepped up to the mic. She looked nervous, late 20s, sharp eyes. Mr. Mayor, she began, what advice would you give to someone who's been offered a leadership role at a startup, but the company has a controversial history, one involving financial misconduct? I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Do your homework, I said. If you step into a house that's already on fire, you'd better know where the exits are. She smiled faintly. That's what I thought. Thank you. After the session, she approached me in the hallway. That company I mentioned, it's called Ardent Innovations, she said. They've rebranded now, but some of the original team is still involved. I felt a flicker of something cold and familiar in my chest. Someone named Celeste Monroe is consulting for them again, she added. They're trying to position themselves for a government contract. A big one. That was all I needed to hear. I went home that night and opened the file folder I had tucked away months ago. The one labeled post-divorce, just in case. Inside, emails, receipts, forensic reports, a summary of the shell corporations, timelines, account records. I had handed most of this off to lawyers before, but I had kept one copy for myself. Not because I planned to use it, but because, well, insurance. I called a contact I knew from Redline's compliance team. I explained what I'd heard and offered the documents anonymously. Within 2 weeks, Ardent's rebranding effort came under quiet review by a federal oversight board. Someone, not me, submitted a formal report including my evidence. That was all it took. They didn't get the contract. Worse, a local investigative journalist picked up the story. He didn't name names in print, but he painted a clear picture. Former executives from a failed partnership using shell corporations to attempt to pivot into government consulting. Speculation ran wild. Industry forums lit up. The quiet damage was done. Ardent lost 2 of its core investors. Several consultants, including Celeste, were removed, pending internal review. Word spread like it always does in tight circles, not with drama, but with firm, polite avoidance. Their phones stopped ringing. Invitations dried up. It was the kind of revenge that didn't require fire or fury. Just light. Light on the truth. Light on the facts. Let people draw their own conclusions. And they did. Celeste didn't reach out. Not after that. I doubt she ever will again. Months later, I received a letter. Not from her. From a former Ardent employee who'd once been roped in as a contractor under false pretenses. She thanked me. Said my actions saved her from getting tied to something ugly and irreversible. She said no one had ever done that for her before. That meant more to me than vengeance ever could. These days, my life is quiet. Simpler. I run a small advisory group, just a handful of people, helping entrepreneurs launch startups the right way. Ethically. Transparently. I don't charge what I used to. I don't need to. I do it because it feels good to give people the tools I wish I'd had when I started. I also started writing. Not books. Just essays. About leadership, failure, starting over. A friend convinced me to post one on LinkedIn. It got some traction. Then more. Then came podcast invites, panel discussions, guest editorials. I never expected that second act. Lucas and Alina are getting married next spring. He asked me to give a short toast. I'm still working on it. Nora's moving back to Charlotte for her residency. She wants to live nearby, and I told her I'd help her find a place. The 3 of us had dinner last Sunday. They brought over takeout. We ate on the patio under string lights, and for a moment, I looked around and thought, this is enough. Not in a settling kind of way, but in a peace kind of way. Celeste didn't win. Brendan and Malik didn't win. They played a short game. I played a long one. And now, I sleep with both eyes closed. I don't know if this qualifies as advice, but here's what I'll leave you with. If you're betrayed, don't rush to destroy the people who hurt you. Let them sit in the truth of what they've done. Let the world notice on its own. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone pay. It's showing them you were never the one who lost. You were the one who walked away, with your integrity intact and your future still yours to shape. And that, my friends, is priceless.